Hi, Femi. I'm Lotte Brondum. I'm heading the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. Lovely mic check. From the president of Towards Zero Foundation, hello, David.
Hi, Femi. It's a great pleasure to be here. Towards Zero Foundation is a UK registered charity. One of our major projects is called the Global New Car Assessment Programme, where we do independent safety rating of motor vehicles all across the world, working with a network of partners.
Good to have you. The Senior Associate Dean of George Washington University. I do not know how the students are coping this afternoon. They're on their own.
Thank you very much, Femi. Delighted and honored to be here, Adnan Haider. More important than that is that I've been a researcher and worker in the field of road safety for over 20 years.
So
honored to be here.
Oh, so good to have you. Thank you so much for making time. Online, virtually, the Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at Autoliv. Good to see you. Can you greet the global audience, please, Per?
Good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Per Eriksson, dialing in from Stockholm, Sweden. I hope you hear me fine.
We hear you beautifully. Thank you so much. Representative of the Victims Group, Association Madre de Dolor. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for making time. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. It is an honor to be here. I'm a member of Madre del Dolor and International Road Victims Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety, an important part of our conversation today. Hello, we see you. Please greet the global audience.
Hi, I'm pleased to be here. My name is Laura Daniela Gomez, and I'm here to represent the voices of all the young people around the world who have ideas and proposals to make roads safer.
I asked all of our speakers to make sure they had concrete examples, brought a story that was relevant, and then also an important point that they really wanted to make sure made it to the agenda of the big high-level global road safety meeting that is happening next June. I know they did both of these things, but I want to start with Viviam. Viviam, because your story is so personal, so deep, that it has become part of your activism. I know you can't tell the whole story, but give us a sense, because I think it's important that we hear this before we have the rest of our discussion. Viviam.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm here because I am Kevin Sedano's mother. I always show his face, I always show his picture, because he was killed in a hit-and-run case when he was in a hit-and-run crash when he was 14 years old. He died a week after, and since then, I have made road safety as part of my life. What I want to make clear is that I'm not a lawyer, that I'm not a road safety expert, that I don't work for road safety. But what I feel, just like probably most road safety families, is that we are the dark side, the void side, the painful side of everything that you've been talking about today. So I hope that with this experience that unfortunately I had to live, we can change and we can make others avoid being in our situation.
Viviam, thank you for sharing that. I'll come back to you because you are going to hear ideas and policies and suggestions, and I'm just going to bounce them off you. It's like, will this work? Is this enough? Is this enough work? So I'll come back to you, and you can help me run this session together, because I want to use you as our barometer for how we're doing. Adnan, there's so much research on road safety right now. And going into this second decade of action, the first decade of action left us wanting. What more research can there be? What else do we need?
Femi, you're right that the past 20 years have led to enormous advances in our ability to understand what interventions work. Now, having the experience of the first decade behind us, we need to understand how they work. And not how they work generically, but in every country represented by a member state here today. So it's not so much learning about whether a particular intervention is effective or not in reducing injury or reducing death, but how do you take that intervention and implement it in your country at scale. Because if you do it in a small pilot program, in a small community, it's not going to change your numbers. It must be done with high coverage so that the people who are most at risk of getting injured and dying actually are the beneficiaries of those interventions. And that's the type of research we need: implementation research, policy research, and evidence to help policymakers on the ground real time.
As the first few videos were playing, I could see you writing down notes. What did you write down so early?
That's great observation, Femi, expected of you, but I was trying to decipher what, for example, Dr. Olive Kobosenge or Rob McInerney was saying. And in some ways, they were appealing to us. They were representing their sectors, but they were saying how this is the moment for all of us to acknowledge that we have come a long way, but there has to be concerted efforts over the next years. I loved the energy that they represented.
David, would you just remind people who might not know your organization or might have forgotten its mission? Your mission is very clear. Will you tell us what it is?
Yeah, we work particularly around vehicle safety and testing from a consumer perspective, the performance of vehicles. And I think for the high-level meeting, it's very important to focus on the challenges we face in the next decade and the discussion about private sector involvement. There's a very specific role for one key part of the private sector, which is that bit of the private sector that actually produces all the vehicles. Interestingly, it's heavily concentrated in the G20 countries, of which I'm very pleased to see quite a number here. But it is very likely between now and 2030 that there will be 1 billion more new motor vehicles put on our roads, adding to the existing fleet over the next decade. Now, that represents a big challenge in itself. How are we going to make sure that those vehicles are as safe and as clean as possible? We need to make sure that they really represent best available technologies across the world. That's a huge challenge, but there are definite steps that could be taken. It's interesting to reflect on what happened at COP26 in Glasgow a few weeks ago, where there was an agreement involving the automotive sector to sign up to a commitment for emissions-free vehicles, zero-emission vehicles, by 2035 in major markets and 2040 thereafter. Why can't we do the same thing at the high-level meeting? Let's see if we can get a commitment from the automotive makers to meet the minimum UN vehicle standards across the board really as soon as possible. That's the way we will ensure that this new cohort of vehicles are going to be as clean and as safe as possible. And just one concrete example, there's a very important life-saving technology for motorcycles, and there may be 1 billion new motorcycles joining the fleet in the next decade, and that's anti-lock brakes. Anti-lock brakes technology is not new. It's actually a 20th century technology. It's very inexpensive. It is hugely important, for example, in Asia, where motorcycles are a very predominant technology, that ABS is fitted to all motorbikes across the board globally, but particularly in Asia. Those are the kind of concrete, specific commitments that could be made at the high-level meeting in June, July next year. Thank you.
What's so obvious to me in this day and other road safety conversations, no shortage of solutions. Nobody's saying, oh, I don't know what we can do. Everybody has suggestions. Everyone has solutions. So how do we make them real? Per, your job is safety. That is what you do. Autoliv is a major safety supplier. What do you feel your role is in advancing safety standards? How can you help? What can you contribute?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I'm really honored to be able to be a part of this discussion. And we see a number of areas that are essential to address to manage critical gaps that we have around safe mobility in general. And we need to do it in an actionable and practical manner. And we actually have some experience from that, collaborating with academia, collaborating with EV OEMs around the world, collaborating with society at large. And we see three main opportunities, three main priorities going forward. And the first one is to accelerate the adaptation of safe system principles and evidence-based approach in all countries. And this is obviously a huge area and beyond our direct control, and therefore we truly need to address it in a broad and high level attention. If we don't see a safe system approach, we will fail to identify the safety risks. We risk putting in place suboptimal countermeasures, and we will obviously fail to convince ourselves that we are making progress. And the opportunity here lies in system-level thinking and work of many actors. And we need to support national governments with an open-minded and evidence-based cross-sector collaboration. And we know how to do that. We have the experience, and it's all about the triple helix collaboration. And we, for example, we are members in Vision Zero Academy and do trainings on a regular basis. And in India, quite recently, we brought policymakers together in a joint working group where we issued some 20 recommendations to government, several which are now underway. Things like National Safety Board, the Bharat NCAP, the safety data that we provided in order to support passenger airbag fitment, i.e. already existing technology that could be utilized in order to save more lives. Another area we think are absolutely essential, already touched upon earlier, that is how do we address the safety of all the unprotected road users, the vulnerable road users. And we've heard throughout the meeting today that they represent more than half of the global road fatalities. And I think it was a very well put statement earlier that there are already technology available. But here we can do more. We can do more both when it comes to innovation on vehicle safety, as well as infrastructure around the vulnerable road users and addressing areas like motorcycles, micro mobility, and so forth. So what are the equivalent innovation of a seatbelt, for example, for two-wheelers? We have, by the way, recently formed a collaboration with Malaysian government to work with them in order to develop their holistic power two-wheeler safety assessment system, which again, I think is a good example where we together can collaborate in order to create value. And the third area where I think we can add value, that is, and that this I think is a need that had come up throughout the day, and that is how we can adopt more harmonized technical regulations and thereby the fitment of already proven safety technologies and vehicle safety, especially in the low and middle income countries. We always try to come at it with a fact-based and calculated approach. And we could, as an example, show the Indian government the life-saving potential of occupant protection, passenger protection, like passenger airbags and curtains. And the Indian government, to their credit, seemed to be poised to deliver on this, which is extremely encouraging. So there are a number of areas where we can collaborate together and thereby create value in this area.
I want to bring in Daniela. And Daniela, I would like you to remind everybody what we are doing here today. We're not just talking because we enjoy each other's company and we all agree about road safety improvements. It's because next year there is going to be a high-level meeting and we are trying to shape that agenda. What do you want to be talked about, discussed at that meeting?
Thank you so much for that question. What I would like to see in that meeting is a different set of mind. Every day, just over 1,000 young people under the age of 25 years are killed in road traffic crashes around the world. So if we want to get different results in road fatalities, we need to do things differently. we want to create new alternatives to save lives, we have to involve new people, like young people. If we want to prevent young people from being the most affected due to road crashes, you, the ones that are here today, have to engage us in the design and implementation of solutions. In the road safety field, we need that every multi-stakeholder table works more with young people at every level, so that young men and women, just as me, are effectively involved in policy design and implementation processes to work towards safer roads. So that's what I would like to see in June next year, more engagement of young people, but a meaningful youth engagement.
See, Danielle, I don't need to tell you as a youth activist that there often are conversations about important issues that youth are involved in, but they're siloed. They even have a separate day. Have a separate day to have that youth conversation. And we're going to talk about the other conversation on another day. So I know you're used to that. You have that experience. So at a high-level meeting, where should you be? Where should your seat be at the table? Who do you want to be there at the high level, the highest level?
Well, I would like to be next to the decision makers, just being sure that they are hearing my proposals, my ideas, and the ideas I could bring from other people or other young people who I'm talking to every day. For example, in the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety, we are doing a lot of amazing things, but I think they would have greater impact if we have the attention of governments, of the private sector, of other civil society organizations. So we really need to have that seat just next, like in the same level or at the same level.
Next to the heads of state, Daniela, I'm going to be looking for you, okay? Exactly. June the 30th, 2022. I've just got you a seat at the high table, all right? We are shaping the agenda, stirring things up. All right, we hear you. Lotte, I loved Rob McInerney, CEO of IRVP, because he was smiling when he was giving his video presentation. He was talking about the power of NGOs. Just let us do this. We will help you. We will lead the way. And there was a huge big smile at the end of the video. I have a feeling that Rob is a smiler anyway, but it was great energy. You represent so many NGOs. This alliance, the power of the alliance, how can we put it to work? How can we utilize it for next year?
Yeah, thank you, Femi. That's I promise you, it's a very powerful movement that is under the umbrella of the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. We have 300 NGOs, passionate people in 98 countries. That's a power force. And they come with that energy that you saw in Rob, that you have seen everywhere. And a lot of them are youth. I can just tell you that there is a source of power there that we can tap into. And these NGOs, the NGO's role is to defend the cause. We're not politically engaged. We don't have a stake in anything. We're just interested in reducing fatalities for the reasons that Viviam told you, that a lot of us have a connection to the numbers. We know people, we have family members we have a connection to the numbers, and we don't want this to happen to other people. So there's that passion, and there's this genuine interest in reducing the fatality numbers. So we defend the cause, and we seek to influence the political agenda and the practices that we have that are there, that the academia amplify the voices of academia. They're bringing solutions forward to us. And that's what you get from NGOs. Our role is also to keep it on the agenda, to push and push and push, to knock on the door, to keep on reminding that it's not okay that all of us know somebody who had been in a crash. It's not okay, and it's not normalized, and it should never, ever be normalized. We shouldn't have mothers like Viviam who year after year come forward and tell us their stories. This has to end. And these NGOs have that passion, and that's our role that we that we bring to the table. And I completely agree with you, Femi, that Daniela and us, we need to sit next to the leaders. We need to sit next to the decision maker, the head of states, because it's the head of states who make the decisions. And we all here sitting with our small budgets on road safety and on traffic, but it's the head of states who can make that decision. And that's why we need to be there at that table.
I'm opening up this discussion, this conversation, the shaping of the agenda for next June 30th and July the 1st to member states. If you're here in the room in New York, you have something that you want to add, a question to our speakers, I am letting you know now so that you can filter your questions through. You have 30 minutes to do it. Don't leave it to the last 25. Otherwise the question won't get in there. You're very welcome to be part of this conversation. Viviam, I promised I would keep bouncing back to you. Who do you want to talk to?
Well, I'd like to talk to everybody because the truth is that I see that a lot is being done. Today we've been listening to everybody telling us about what has to be done, how it has to be done, who it has to be done with. So we know absolutely everything. If we know absolutely everything and it's perfectly summarized in the Global Plan of Action, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for everybody to start doing something? What I feel is that we need the political will. So we have all of the information. We have all of the information and know that road crashes are preventable. We know that they're avoidable, but many people still talk about accidents when we know that they're not accidents. A lot is being done as regards COVID, as regards world health issues, as regards women's violence. So then why is it that especially in low and middle income countries, we have to be begging for political will so as to save lives? For example, I'll just give you 2 or 3 examples because today you asked us for concrete examples, right? For example, we all know how to build safe roads. There are a lot of engineers that are talking about safe roads. Okay, why is it then that many roads are not safe? In low and middle income countries, roads not only lack safety to avoid human error, but they're the cause of road crashes because of lack of maintenance. For example, cars. David, just now you were speaking about cars. The cars that we receive here in low and middle income countries, they don't have the same safety standards as the cars that are sold in high income countries. And we pay exactly the same amount of money as others do in high income countries. And then you're constantly telling us, okay, let's not use our cars. Let's take the transport system. But if you come here to South America, you'll see that buses and trains are packed full. You'll see that people have to be hanging from doors to be able to commute to their jobs. And we also know that drivers probably work double the amount of time, putting their lives in danger, putting in danger the lives of other passengers and the lives of other vulnerable road users. And as regards legislation, this is something that I really haven't heard very much about today. Legislation. We all know that we're speaking about justice, that we don't want vengeance, that I would have liked the person that ran over my son and left him suffering on the road, at least to have been taken his driver's license away. We had to fight for 5 years to be able to reach an oral hearing. And he was only in prison because of the great effort that we did. He was only in prison for 2 months when we know that it isn't an accident. We know that road crime is real crime and that they should be treated as crime, that legislation should reflect the seriousness of these crimes. So when speaking about post-crash, remember legislation. Remember that legislation as regards road crashes, they're also preventable. Just one last thing. Again, I have to go back to something personal because even though it is personal, I know that this is what many people suffer. My husband always told me that he wouldn't be able to look at the driver that ran over and killed our son. Well, he couldn't. A week before we reached the oral hearing, he was only 50 years old and he died of a heart attack. So I had to go on with my other two children. I had to go on with all of the economic difficulties. I had to go on with Kevin's trial. And this is something that doesn't appear in numbers or statistics or documents. It's something that we have to face. So justice helps us. It helps us heal our wounds, and it helps us prevent other cases, because the 2 months that the person was in jail, the person who ran over Kevin was in jail, during those 2 months, many times they called me and they told me that another driver that had run over a person immediately went to the police station because the lawyer said, you'd better go and be there in case they call you, because in Kevin's case, the driver was sent to jail. As soon as he was set free, nowadays what lawyers say is, you know what, don't even go to the police station. Maybe nobody saw you, and if they did, don't worry. You'll probably remain free. You won't have to go to jail. And in a couple of days, you'll get your driver's license back. So that's why I want this message to be clear. And I want everybody that we've been listening to today to really do what they're saying. And let's see if we can have this political will soon.
Adnan and then David.
So at the risk of creating a debate, I think that Viviam, I heard Lotte, I heard Rob, expressing that they are not political, that their organizations are not political. But each one of you wants to sit next to a decision maker. Each one of you wants to be affected by and listened to by a decision maker. So road safety is inherently political. And you will not achieve the goals that you desire unless we all, myself included and the academic sector included, become smarter politically. Therefore, I think it is time for us to say that yes, we are ready to engage politically, to get the political will that Viviam talks about, to ensure that our youth are sitting next to the political leaders, and to make sure that those laws that have been passed, the nice words that ministers often say in large rooms, are actually implemented and backed by investments. So I'm going to purport, Femi, that actually we have to be political if we want to achieve success in the second decade.
I 100% agree. If you can do more than 100%, I would, with what Alan just said. In fact, I want to try and, I think we've all got it. I want to channel my inner Greta Thunberg and say what shouldn't happen in June, July high-level meeting is more blah, blah, blah. I've been coming to this assembly since 2003 and the first debate and resolution on road safety. I've been to all the ministerial conferences. I've been to many of the General Assembly discussions. And if you read all of those resolutions, it's actually quite an education in terms of strategies and ways to move forward. We now have an extremely succinct global plan for the next decade. And what we want to see is implementation. So I come back to what I mentioned before. In one sector, let's have side commitment frameworks attached to the global plan. So there'd be one for automotive, one for infrastructure, one for post-crash care and so on. Solid commitments, multi-stakeholder commitments that could be announced, confirmed, dedicated at the high-level meeting, not just another General Assembly declaration.
Yeah, thank you. I think the generic language that you talked about, David, is very important, that we move away from that. We move away from that we need to do something. And I think that unless we start talking about the money, and I'm very pleased that we did this morning, talk about investment, talk about in financing, nothing will happen, because that's priorities and that's politics. The money goes where the priorities are. And unless we start being very bold about the funding that's required and the investment that is required, I don't think anything will happen. And we haven't been talking about this. We haven't, for example, the global plan doesn't come with an envelope. It's a plan. We don't know the investment that's needed. We don't know the sources of funding. We don't know the expenditure that's needed. We don't know what each country has on these different things. So we need meaningful investments and commitments to become real action. And then this comes with this leadership from the top and those we want to sit next to, all of us, because without this strong leadership from the top, and that's the political will that you're talking about, Viviam, it is the head of state who can decide the different budget lines. It is the head of state who can budget and who controls the budget. And unless there's a buy-in from the head of state, nothing will really happen. So it's only the heads of states. And I think the declaration that's coming out of the head of state meeting or the high-level meeting next year, it has to showcase that there is this buy-in from the heads, because otherwise we can forget it. I think also something we need to start on, and I just alluded to it, is this reporting on the expenditure. It's reporting on the funding, on the expenditure, and on the sources of funding. And I think we are pretty good. We know who the funders are. We know where the money is coming from. I think we need transparency in these things. We need we need to showcase annually how much money is going into road safety, what is it spent on. Because when we have that, we also know what works and what doesn't work. I heard today that there was a pledge from Russia. That's really amazing. But otherwise, I haven't heard anything about funding. I know there's a road safety fund that I'm part of, but it's not enough. We need much more funding. But unless we measure it on an annual basis, and this is reported in a transparent manner, we don't know what works and what doesn't work. And I think that should be part of the high-level meeting next year. There's also something around catalytic funding for the low-income countries that needs to be in place. They're the ones who struggle. We can't expect them to. We can't expect to see low-income countries having that level of investment without donors coming forward. And then I think we're in a very lucky position that we actually have a lot of ways that we can leverage funding. There were some examples this morning from how we can do it. We are, as a road safety community, in a good position to leverage different ways of taxes, of road tolls, accident funds, enforcement. There is a lot of ways we can generate funding. And this is done by a lot of other movements. The tobacco movement have been very efficient in doing this. And I think we need to learn from them, or we need to look to them. But this only comes if there's political will and there's the leadership from the top, because if we're not even willing to start looking at this, nothing will happen.
Per, you are looking very thoughtful. Share those thoughts with us. You're on mute at the moment. Those thoughts are going very well. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you.
That I can nod when you make a good point. Go ahead.
Well, I am indeed thoughtful. There's a lot of good things being said there. And being a part of the automotive industry and see from within what forces are in play. It is actually not so that it's the end consumer that truly drives the safety content in the vehicle. It's not really the OEM, the manufacturers of the cars. It's first and foremost, as stated by so many, it's the legislator. It's the fact that we have harmonized technical regulation so that we can fit the vehicles with the already existing safety technology that we have. May that be airbags across the whole vehicle and so forth. And it's also that will drive new innovation into, for example, the two-wheeler market, the other unprotected occupants in the car, as well as other road users. So that's really a central driver, as Viviam pointed out earlier. Absolutely key. Let me just add one more thing to that if all of us around this table also look into our own organizations, our own operations, and try to bring to the table how we can ensure that our operations are safe, that the logistics, the transportation that we enter into also are safe, then we will add value to this topic as well.
I'm going to bring in Member State Finland. Thank you for being part of our session. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists for this very interesting discussion here today. I would particularly like to thank Ms. Perrone for sharing her personal and very painful experience with us here today. I would just like to flag the issue of children and how we can make children safer on the roads. We have heard today that traffic accidents are one of the leading causes of death among children globally. And in this context, I would like to highlight the issue of child restraint systems. The proper installation of a child restraint system reduces the probability of death by about 90% for babies and between 54 and 80% for small children. Yet, the majority of the countries in the world do not have any legislation that makes the use of child restraint systems mandatory. And according to WHO, only 53 countries, which covers only about 70% of the population, meet the criteria for satisfactory legislation. So given this context, I would like to ask the panelists what you think we can do to make child restraint systems mandatory globally, and what kind of cooperation, especially with the private sector and other stakeholders, can be done to finance this and make available car seats and other child restraint systems globally. Thank you.
David is staring at me with laser eyesight, so I'm going to guess he wants to go first. Other panelists, please put up your hand if you also have something you want to add. Per, I'm going to guess that this is going to be your territory too. Do tell me if I'm wrong, but let's start with David.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely good point raised. A key point there is a UN regulation, UN standard already available for child seats. So it's actually very easy for countries to adopt a good practice regulation. It's already available. One of the key things is that the best child seats are so-called ISOFIX seats, where the seat clicks in, and the vehicle must have those mounting points. And this is where, as part of what I was describing, a voluntary commitment from industry would be to universally make those mounting points available in all new vehicles. That would be a very practical step. It's the kind of thing that could be included in such a commitment. I mean, the other issue I would like to highlight in relation to children, which applies, of course, to all road users, is speed management. If we can better control speed management, if we make roads safe for children, we will make roads safe for everyone. And a critical thing in that is to get speed better controlled. And that is a combination of factors. It's about better road design, it's about better police enforcement, it's also about vehicle technology. From next July in Europe, all new vehicles will have intelligent speed assistance. That's a technology that will require or inform the driver if they're exceeding the speed limit. So speed is a vital cross-cutting issue in this whole agenda, which is reflected in the global plan. Thank you.
So, Per, Finland member state question was about a global mandate for child safety restraints. Your thoughts? What's possible?
I can only repeat what